So, how is our food produced here in the United States? Today, agriculture uses both high input industrialized and low input traditional methods to produce the world's food supply. There are three systems that supply most of our food. The first one is croplands, which produce grains. 66% of the world's population survive by eating rice, wheat, as well as corn crops. So here's wheat, corn, and rice. People directly consume about 48% of the world's grain production, and about 35% of the world's grain production is used to feed livestock. The remaining 17%, mostly corn, is used to make biofuels such as ethanol for cars and other vehicles. The second system that is used to supply most of our food is through rangelands, pastures, and feedlots for meat and dairy products. The third is fisheries and aquaculture or fish farming for seafood. These are two pictures of fish farms, and here's an example of a livestock feedlot, which is also known as CAFO, Concentrated Animal Feeding Operation. So what are the differences between industrialized and organic agriculture? Well, industrialized agriculture uses inorganic fertilizers and sewage sludge to supply nutrients to the plants that are growing in the farm field. They also use synthetic chemical pesticides. They can also use conventional as well as genetically modified seeds or genetically modified organisms, which we're going to talk about more in the next couple of slides. They also depend heavily on non-renewable fossil fuels for their tractors and the equipment that they utilize to harvest and plant the crops. They can produce significant air and water pollution, as well as contribute to the greenhouse gases. In addition, industrialized agriculture is heavily focused on global exports. In dealing with livestock, they typically use antibiotics and growth hormones to produce meat and meat products. So that's industrialized agriculture. Organic agriculture would focus on prevention of soil erosion and the use of organic fertilizers such as animal manure and compost, but no sewage sludge to provide nutrients to the plants. They also employ crop rotation and biological pest control, or integrated pest management, which relies on natural predators of the pests. Organic agriculture uses no genetically modified seeds, and it attempts to reduce fossil fuel use when available and increase the use of renewable energy such as solar or wind power to generate electricity for their farms. Organic agriculture focuses on sustainable farming in ways that reduces water pollution and less air pollution, as well as less greenhouse gases. Organic agriculture also focuses on local and regional farm produce markets as opposed to global exports, and they do not use any antibiotics or growth hormones to produce their meat. So industrialized agriculture has really grown because of the Green Revolution. Since 1950, about 88% of the increase in global food production has come from using high-input industrialized agriculture to increase yields in the process of what's been called the Green Revolution. There's three steps to the Green Revolution. The first one was to develop and plant monocultures of selectively bred or genetically engineered high-yield variety of key crops such as rice, wheat, and corn. The second step in the Green Revolution was to produce high yields by using large inputs of water and synthetic, inorganic fertilizer and pesticides. The third step of Green Revolution was to increase the number of crops grown per year on a particular plot of land through multiple cropping. So, the first Green Revolution used high input agriculture to increase crop yields in most of the world's more developed countries, especially here in the US between 1950 and 1970. A second Green Revolution has taken place since 1967. Fast-growing varieties of rice and wheat, specifically bred for tropical and subtropical climates, have been introduced into some middle-income, less developed countries such as India, China, and Brazil. Basically, the goal has been to produce more food on less land and has helped protect some biodiversity by preserving large areas of forests, grasslands, and wetlands. Also, because of these two green revolutions, the world grain production has tripled between 1961 and 2009. So, the goal is a high yield from existing cropland, and generalities about the green revolution is that they plant monocultures of selectively bred crops, they use large amounts of water through irrigation, as well as synthetic fertilizers and pesticides, and they'll even do multiple cropping, where they will plant multiple crops throughout the various times of the year, which can tend to overextend the soil nutrients in the soils of the fields that they're planting on. As mentioned on the previous slide, the goal is to produce higher yield, and one of the ways that we've done that is through genetically modified organisms. So new and hardier crop varieties have been created through crossbreeding through artificial selection, as well as genetically modifying or genetically engineering food or ingredients. Crossbreeding through artificial selection has been used for centuries by farmers and scientists to develop genetically improved varieties of crops and livestock animals. The chart or graph on the right depicts how a common wild mustard seed has been artificially selectively bred to create spin-offs from it. So this plant itself has been crossbred to create broccoli for the flower buds, cabbage from the terminal bud, turnips because of the roots, cauliflower from the flower buds, and kale because of the leaves. So we've taken one plant and we have artificially bred it through crossbreeding and artificial selection and created varieties of other plants as well. Selective breeding in the first green revolution has also yielded amazing results with other types of crops. Ears of corn used to be about the size of your little finger. Now look at what we have. Wild tomatoes were once the size of grapes. Now look at what we have. Traditional crossbreeding is a very slow process and typically can take up to 15 years to produce a commercially valuable new crop variety. As a result, because it takes such a long time frame, the concern is that those varieties are only good for about 5 to 10 years before pest and disease can reduce their effectiveness. So the second gene revolution is where we genetically engineer food or genetically modify food, and currently about 70% of all United States food products have some type of genetically engineering food or ingredient within the makeup of that food product. If you purchase certified organic food with the U.S. Department of Ag label on it, you can be certain that it does not use any genetically modified seeds or ingredients within that food. So the demand for food is being met by increases in production. Between 1961 and 2010, the average meat consumption per person doubled. The good news is that world meat production actually increased 4 times. One of the ways that this is happening is with CAFOs, concentrated animal feeding operations. This is when animals are raised in an industrialized system where they are in dense packed feedlots and they are fed grain, fish meal, or fish oil, which is usually doctored with growth hormones and antibiotics. Feedlots and CAFOs and the animal waste and runoff associated with them create serious environmental impacts on the air and water, and we're going to discuss some of those. So, the benefits of a CAFO is that you have a low-cost source of meat, milk, and eggs due to the efficient feeding and housing of animals, and increased facility size and animal species specialization. Also, when CAFOs are proposed in a local area, it's usually argued that they will enhance the local economy and increase the employment. The EPA defines an animal feeding operation as an agricultural enterprise where animals are kept and raised in confined situations. Animal feeding operations congregate animals, feed, manure, and urine, as well as dead animals, and production operations in a small land area. Feed is brought into the animals rather than the animals grazing on open land or otherwise seeking feed in pastures. There are about 450,000 animal feeding operations in the United States. A CAFO is a term coined by the EPA for large concentrated animal feeding operations. If an animal feeding operation has more than 1,000 animal units, then it's considered to be a CAFO. So this is the equivalent to 1,000 head of beef cattle, 700 dairy cows, 2,500 swine, or maybe 125,000 chickens, or 82,000 hens that lay eggs. If they are on a particular site for more than 45 days, then that site will qualify as a CAFO. Some cons of a CAFO are listed on the screen. Improper manure management results in nitrogen and phosphorus water quality problems in nearby surface water bodies and groundwater. Manure from livestock contains a pathogen known as E. coli, which, if that gets into the surface water or the groundwater, can cause sickness if it's then consumed by people. In addition, they utilize growth hormones and antibiotics that are then in the animals themselves, which could have a ripple effect during human consumption. The other issue associated with CAFOs is air pollution, and they contribute a lot of methane to climate change because of the animals themselves. And there's concern about them contaminating surface water and groundwater because of the runoff from these facilities having a lot of urine as well as manure. I mentioned earlier that fish farming and aquaculture is an approach to increasing our worldwide availability of seafood. China, India, and Indonesia have the greatest volume of aquaculture harvests worldwide, and the United States is ranked 17th in total aquaculture production. A fishery is a concentration of a particular aquatic species suitable for commercial harvesting in a given ocean area or inland body of water. Fish and shellfish are also produced through aquaculture, and again, this is the practice of raising marine and freshwater fish in freshwater ponds and rice paddies, or in underwater cages that are depicted in the pictures on your screen, in coastal waters or deeper ocean waters. The list of farm species imported to the United States is dominated by shrimp, Atlantic salmon, tilapia, and shellfish, including scallops, mussels, clams, and oysters. Asian countries and Ecuador supply most of the shrimp to the United States market, while Canada, Norway, and Chile supply most of the imported Atlantic salmon. So there are definitely some advantages and disadvantages to CAFOs and aquaculture, and they're listed on the screen in front of you. Increased meat production, higher profits, less land is being used, reduced soil erosion, and you protect biodiversity. However, as mentioned earlier, contributing to greenhouse gases, animal waste can pollute water, and you're using antibiotics and hormones, which could impact humans through consumption. And you have animals that are unnaturally confined and crowded in a small area. Those are the trade-offs for animal feedlots. Trade-offs for aquaculture is advantages are high efficiency, high yield, and reduced overharvesting of fisheries. And there's employment and jobs and profits as well. Disadvantages are that use of fish oil and fish meal on fish farms depletes wild fisheries. Also, there's a large waste output from having so many fish confined in such a small area. And we're finding that these dense populations of fish are vulnerable to disease.